Hello, everyone. I'm Jorge Molina, your immigration attorney. And today we have a very interesting topic. Well, it is to me, and that is inadmissibility. As always, we're always trying to provide useful information and tools so you can make the best informed decision regarding your case and your family and how to move forward. Today, we have a very interesting topic, which is inadmissibility. So our goal is to start a series of webinars regarding inadmissibility and well, today we're going to talk about what it is and then how to cure it or how to fix it if this is an issue that you need to resolve. Okay, so I prepared a presentation and I'm going to share my screen with you right now. Just bear with me. Just bear with me. Two. Right. So here we go. All right, folks. So first, we're going to talk about what inadmissibility is. It's a weird term, and we're going to define it. Then we're going to talk about what makes a person inadmissible, right? So this is there's a limited universe of what would make a person inadmissible, and we're going to talk about these things and all these categories. And in our following webinar, we're going to talk about how to get rid of inadmissibility and study potential solutions or strategies to avoid the finding of inadmissibility, and also understand, whose decision it is to find someone inadmissible or not. All right, but today we're going to just, start with the definitions and explaining what it is. All right, so, basically inadmissibility is a determination that a person is not allowed into the United States or allowed to change their status to a lawful permanent resident of the United States. So what does this mean? So when we study the word inadmissibility, so it means by itself that you are not allowed into or allowed as a type of or a class of person into the United States, right? So it's a finding that you've committed either an offense or taking an action that would render you a person that is not welcome into the United States. That's why we have that logo there with the entry denied, pretty much. So think of perhaps a bouncer at a bar letting you know you cannot come in here, or someone just denying entry to their house or property, right? So that's what inadmissibility means. And then, but is it the end of the world that they say, well, you cannot come in? No, not really, because many grounds of inadmissibility have waivers available, and some others have time limitations. So, for example, if you committed a immigration violation, but it's been over 10, 20 years, in some cases, you are not subject to that inadmissibility finding any longer. So what makes you inadmissible is listed in the Immigration and Nationality Act. There's a limited universe. It's not like any action or it's a thing left up to a person's discretion. No, it's listed by statute. And today we're going to study or look at some of the things that would make you inadmissible. So we're going to start with the first item in the Immigration and Nationality Act, and these are health-related grounds, right? So when we're thinking about these things, remember, right? So the country, the United States, as a sovereign, meaning as its own independent nation and country, can decide who can come into the country and who cannot, right? So think of people that you would welcome into your house and people that you would not want in your house. So the first grounds we have here are health-related grounds. And here, very important things that the government looks at, whether you're either adjusting your status in the United States or you're trying to enter the country, is health related reasons. So they're looking at whether you have things like tuberculosis, right? So this makes sense. You don't want to create a new pandemic of sick people. So you make sure that things like tuberculosis are covered here. Importantly, they're also looking for vaccinations against things that have been pretty much eradicated in the United States. For example, measles, rubella, tetanus. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in the United States. I know that there have been some recent outbreaks of measles in some states. I know in California this became an issue a few years ago, but it's things that the government can't regulate and does try to prevent, right? So um, these make sense. Now, recently, the the federal government announced that if you want to immigrate to the United States, you must have a vaccine against COVID-19. So there are limited exceptions. So if it's not age appropriate, and we're thinking here for children. So if the vaccine hasn't been approved for children, children can apply for a blanket waiver saying that the COVID-19 is not appropriate in that case. Or if your physician, your doctor tells you that no, you should not take the COVID-19 vaccine for whatever reason, right? So you either have a condition that would make you more susceptible to adverse effects, maybe you're too old for it, or pregnant, or things like that. But again, the doctor doing this test would have to request for a blanket waiver when they're completing your medical examination. So this is essential to bear in mind. So let's move on to what I found, or what I find to be the more interesting portion of the grounds of inadmissibility. So just to level with you, the thing that really attracted me to immigration law to start with were these criminal and related grounds of inadmissibility and findings, and what would make you deportable or inadmissible. So it's incredibly interesting, but there's a limited universe of what makes you inadmissible for crime related reasons. But the biggest umbrella or category are crimes involving moral turpitude. So interestingly, crimes involving moral turpitude are not defined in the Immigration and Nationality Act. So these are have been developed by case law. But in essence, a crime involving moral turpitude is an offense that, as a society, as a society, we determine that it falls below acceptable norms of decent and civilized behavior, right? So not everything would be crime involving moral turpitude. The key element is that you must have a culpable state of mind. What does that mean? Well, you must do something intentionally, pretty much, and knowing, or a reasonable person knowing that action under those circumstances are wrong. So what are the things that would trigger the crime involving moral turpitude inadmissibility ground? Well, things like shoplifting. So that we put a picture of someone shoplifting there. It looks like they're stealing a mouse. So that would be considered a crime involving moral turpitude. Some other things include an assault with an aggravating element. So assault in many statutes do not have a culpable mental state requirement, but they could have an aggravating element requirement. So for example, if you assault someone with the intent of killing them, or you assault someone that is either elderly or a police officer, right? So those are aggravating factors that would make it a crime involving moral turpitude. Other things that are, obviously CIMTs are murder, For example, if you kill someone, that's obviously something that falls beyond what we expect civilized people to do. Or theft, right? So any theft offense or document fraud, things of that nature. So what are some examples that we see here, or often? So if you've been arrested in the United States for having fake documents, right? So if you have a fake lawful permanent resident card, and then the police, arrest you, find that, and they charge you with document fraud, that is considered a crime involving moral turpitude. Some other things, like shoplifting, theft by check. But, there's also some circumstances that we make a mistake, it's a minor error. So it would fall within the petty offense exception. So what is a petty offense exception? If you couldn't have gone to jail for more than 1 year, and the sentence imposed to you is less than 6 months confinement in jail or prison. So that would fall within a petty offense exception and is not considered a ground of inadmissibility. These are several examples. I know it's a lot of technical language. If you're unsure whether your conviction is a crime involving moral turpitude or not, consult the qualified attorney. We study this almost every day. We stay on top of the case law. So if you have any doubts, please ask. Here are some other examples that are crimes involving moral turpitude. So, money laundering. And then in some cases, for example, money laundering is also considered an aggravated felony. And in some other cases, we have different grounds of inadmissibility, and also these are crimes involving moral turpitude. For example, prostitution. So prostitution has its own category of inadmissibility, but could also be considered a crime involving moral turpitude. So if it's listed in one category, it doesn't mean that it cannot be listed in another. But other things that would make you inadmissible into the United States is if you have multiple criminal convictions and the combined sentence is over 5 years. So it doesn't matter if you had a culpable state of mind when you were convicted or when you committed the crime. If you have multiple offenses and the sentences add up to more than 5 years, it means that you are inadmissible. So that's why we're listing the multiple criminal convictions here. Interestingly, even if you're a lawful permanent resident and you live lawfully in the United States and they cannot deport you, if you leave the United States and you have, let's say, multiple DWIs, let's say you have 3 or 4 DWIs, and you depart, let's say you go on vacation with your family, Border Patrol or Border Protection could tell you that they're not going to let you in, that they're going to place you in proceedings because you're inadmissible. So even if you're a lawful resident and you're not deportable in the United States, if you travel outside the United States and you try and come back in, you'd be fine, inadmissible. Another big category are offenses dealing with controlled substances. There is a limited waiver, and it only applies to possession of marijuana under 30 grams. But if you have a possession of cocaine, of methamphetamine, heroin, anything like that, you would be permanently inadmissible to the United States, and there's no waivers for that. I mean, there is in very exceptional circumstances, but for most people, there's no waivers. And, importantly, also human smugglers and drug trafficking would also render you inadmissible. All right, folks. So the next big category here for grounds of inadmissibility are security-related grounds, right? So think of, individuals related that were engaged in either totalitarian parties. We got the photo of Joseph Stalin here, the longtime dictator of the Soviet Union. But if you're involved with that government, very unlikely nowadays. But that's the typical case that would trigger these grounds of inadmissibility. And other activities would be, being engaged in terrorist activities or in organizations that help out terrorists. So there's actually this ground of inadmissibility actually covers more people that you would imagine, because providing any material support, so it could be um, labor under duress. We have cases that a woman from El Salvador was being held captive by a guerrilla in El Salvador, and she was being forced to clean and cook for them, I believe. And then she was in the United States. She disclosed that, and then it went to appeal and everything, and the appeals court decided that any help, any support to a organization regarded by the United States as a terrorist organization would render you inadmissible under these grounds. So we also have situations where people give money to a nonprofit, and then it turns out that that nonprofit was actually supporting an organization that's deemed by the United States to be a terrorist organization. So any support that you gave, let's say you gave a $5 donation, could be considered material support to a terrorist organization. So again, this can cover a wider range of people that you would initially think. About 20, 30 years ago, being involved in communist parties was a bigger deal. And of course, being involved in the Nazi Holocaust, I think it's been about 5 years since the last person that was involved in the Nazi Holocaust was discovered. I think at that time, that person had become a naturalized citizen. They took away his citizenship, and that person was deported, I think, either to Israel or Poland, and to be prosecuted for war crimes. So again, that's another ground of inadmissibility. And then the other big category are immigration law violators. So here, as opposed to the criminal related grounds, you don't need a conviction. It's just the fact that you committed these things render you inadmissible. So for example, if you lied to an immigration officer, let's say you presented someone else's passport or birth certificate and say you were a US citizen, and then, that's not true. They discover that, they'll send you back to your country, and then you're permanently ineligible for any benefit in the United States for a false claim to US citizenship, right? So that's a very grave offense. Often we get when I need to explain this to clients, I say, well, I didn't know better. It was 20 years ago, or they just told me to do this. I didn't really know what I was doing. Well, that's not an excuse. Unfortunately, it's considered the death penalty under the immigration law, under the United States immigration law, to claim to be a U.S. citizen. What happens if you claim to be a lawful permanent resident? Well, there's a waiver available, but not if you claim to be a U.S. citizen. So that was one of the biggest changes that passed under IRA back in the 1990s. We hope that, before there was a waiver available for that, we hope that there is a waiver available in the future through comprehensive immigration reform. But other grounds of inadmissibility, just dealing with immigration violations, is the 10-year bar and the permanent bar. So the 10-year bar is triggered whenever you're in the United States for over 1 year without authorization. Right. So what happens? So let's say you entered the United States illegally, you stayed here for over 1 year, and then you leave, or you enter lawfully, but you stay in the United States past your initial permission, or the initial time that they allow you to stay in the United States, and then you leave the United States. That moment, that second that you leave the United States, you are not allowed to come back for 10 years unless you request a waiver. Okay, so that's that ground. Second ground or the permanent bar, similar to that, but instead, let's say same thing, same facts, right? You stay in the United States for over 1 year unlawfully, you leave the United States, but instead of staying there and trying to get, or staying outside the United States and trying to get a waiver, you come back or you try to come back illegally. Now you have triggered the permanent bar, and the permanent bar, the difference between the first offense is that with the permanent bar, there's no waiver. So that means that you're going to have to go back to or stay outside the United States for 10 years, prove that you've been outside the United States for 10 years, and then request a special permission to re-enter the United States. So these are very, grave penalties for things that don't require conviction or anything like that. And often they come to light because we disclose them, right? Because you cannot lie in your applications, you cannot lie to the immigration authorities. So, these are not, and obviously these are things that are not, common knowledge or intuitive. These are things that are created by statute. So if they're created by statute, they can also be changed by statute. So comprehensive immigration reform likely could change the way that these things are done. All right, and then there's some other miscellaneous categories. So if you commit if bigamy, if you're married to more than one person at the same time, that would also render you inadmissible. Or for those individuals that were lucky enough to be United States citizens, but for tax purposes, they renounced their citizenship, there's a ground of inadmissibility. Today, we've covered some of the most common grounds of inadmissibility. This is not everything there is. If you have any doubts about your specific case, please consult an attorney. We'll be happy to take your consultations. You can, and let me stop sharing my screen now. You can always reach us to schedule a consultation. We'll be happy to discuss your case with you. If you have been convicted, please have your conviction records ready so we can review them and give you at least a concise answer, or know at how long it will take us to let you know if you're inadmissible, or if there's a waiver available, or if there's something to do in your case. But again, my name is Jorge Molina. You can always reach us by email at info@jmolinalawfirm.com. Again, info@jmolinalawfirm.com, or you can call our office at 469-708-5800. Again, I'm Jorge Molina, and it's a pleasure talking to you today.